Welcome to E-commerce with Coffee, a podcast powered by Amber Engine, where we share e-com secrets for brands over your favorite brew. We start with the caffeine and then leap enthusiastically into behind-the-scenes e-com insights that led to the success of our guests. I'm Nate Svoboda, and I'm about to serve you up the best. Let's get started. Welcome to today's episode of E-commerce with Coffee. Today, I'm speaking with Derric Haynie. He's the Chief Ecommerce Technologist for Ecommerce Tech, which is an organization that helps businesses cut through the noise of the SaaS tool ecosystem for e-commerce. So today, we're really going to be focusing heavily on navigating the e-commerce tech landscape and why someone would ever want to listen to demos for a living. So Derric, really excited to chat with you today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Cool. Well, I guess let's start at the beginning. E-commerce tech, you guys help businesses out in making recommendations to a tool based on the problems they come to you with. So that helps when, you don't know what you don't know what's out there. Now, what got you started in this passion for attempting to understand the e-commerce tech landscape? And, more specifically, why would anyone volunteer to run demos and POCs for a living?
Yeah, I think the first thing is that, when I transitioned, when I played high stakes poker for a living, I had to transition into business. I started my own tech company, which turned into a digital marketing agency, or shut down the tech company, moved into that. And so I was behind what you might, I was 10 years behind anybody else that had entered business straight out of college or something like that. And so I knew that there was all these tools out there that could really help, and I could just plug them in. And I saw these small businesses not really doing a good job of understanding tools. And so right at that stage, just that long ago, that was 7, 8, 9 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. And I was just I've got to test these tools, I've got to implement them, and then we'll put them in place for ourselves so that we can scale out and our agency will be more profitable and our clients will make more money. So that was where I started doing demos. I must have demoed, 200 tools back in the day, just out of curiosity and to see how they might help our agency. And then after that, moving into e-commerce, I was now in charge of a relatively large budget for technology products. And I realized even at a 50-person organization, there's convolution, waste, confusion. I didn't know, like you said, what I didn't know. And then also the act of getting buy-in from my executive team on things that I thought were simple, like using Google Optimize for split testing or using Unbounce for creating landing pages. It was actually a lot harder than you'd expect. And I realized that there's a lot of education needed to get technology adopted properly. And I also, because I've been going to a lot of tech product websites, I was I don't get what this tool does. What is it that they actually do? Why do I have to get to the demo to figure it out, right? So bringing this over into e-commerce technology, which is where I went next, I was selling the tech product, and I realized that we still had a hard time explaining it to people. But when they saw that moment, they were like, oh my God, this is going to make me so much money. And then once, just like any good passion, once you realize that you can help people in a big way, it's your job is to get this information in front of them and get them not necessarily even believing you, because it's true. It's just make sure that you're helping them as best as possible, and you need to help as many people as possible. So I saw that challenge from inside their side. And I said, you know what, I can do this for one tech company, but I think I can do it better for all of them combined. And the landscape is just so convoluted that people need a lot of help here, and nobody's ever stopped to help in this one specific area that's now become a major problem. And so yeah, that's why we set up the business, and I set half of my days to study technology and the other half to talk to merchants about what tools they should be using.
No, I love everything that you just said, but the things that I mostly pull out of that, right? There are so many problems businesses have that they don't even realize there's a tool out there to help them with that. So I think having somebody, like e-commerce tech to, have a brand come to them with a problem, say, hey, this is what we're working on, this is our workflow, we're experiencing bottlenecks, and then you can literally help them find the exact magic bullet in a lot of cases. So I really think that that's great. Now, given that I'd say you're probably an expert at running demos, I mean, people hire personnel to run vendor comparisons. what is your approach to an effective POC or an effective demo, right? Like, what are some of the things that either you can do to impact them, or that maybe to look out for with the vendors that you're talking with?
Yeah, I can give it to you from both sides, from a merchant interviewing the sales guy, but also from the sales team standpoint. The first thing I think a lot of tech companies get wrong is that they don't lead with the true, like, here's why it makes you money and here's the biggest differentiation factor. They often start with, like, I don't know, very subtle intros about what I'd call feature parity, the functionalities that probably before signing up for your tool, I assumed you do. Oh, you're an SMS provider. Okay, so you do abandoned cart SMSs, you do campaigns, you do segmentation. Yeah, I assumed all that stuff already. Why you though, right? Like, why you over the other guys? And then, like, 35 minutes later, they're finally showing me this one really great, like, growth widget or like innovative strategy that I've never seen before, right? Or great split testing functionality. And I'm like, oh, that's why I would choose you over somebody else, right? So burying the lead and really figuring out by listening. You have to do a lot of demos to listen to the customer say aha, or oh, that's amazing, or they keep asking one specific question, put it up front. And on the flip side, as the merchant, trying to cut to the chase and get to that moment is really important. Merchants are right now, there is a lot of feature parity in these major technology categories. So it does look like everything is the same. Everyone says they have, 24/7 best in class customer service. Every single company says that. It's like, well, you better, like, that's duh, like, that's not your differentiation factor. So cutting to the chase as a merchant and asking really specific questions, making sure the tool is the right size, let's say, for this stage of business, meaning, like, do they serve the low end of the market, the mid market, or the high end? And then, of course, where are you in that mix? High growth companies often have to invest in tools a little bit ahead of time on the assumption that they will be a large company that could use the AI personalization, in the next 6 months, but maybe right now it's less effective because they're a little bit smaller. So really understanding that, and then listening to the cues of a sales rep. So if similar to this, there's kind of a good way to pull out. They say, hey, we're working with H&M, Target, and Walmart, and you're like, we do 1 million a year. What do we don't compare to those Fortune 500 brands. Like, that's like a sign that you're probably, in the wrong place. And of course, if they're not showing their pricing, it's probably going to be enterprise focused and stuff like that. So there's a few more things, looking for the right integrations, making sure that you have the right internal resources to manage the tool and keep track of its ROI and progress, make sure that it's being utilized to its fullest. On that note, I would say most of the time somebody, like, gives a 1-star review on a tool, it's because they didn't set it up or use it to its fullest themselves, or they shouldn't have even used the tool in the first place. So yeah, all right, I could go on a whole rant about that, but I'll stop there.
No, I love that. I mean, I think at the end of the day, what you can really boil that down to is setting proper expectations and being transparent, right? And that goes on both sides. But, me being a salesperson, I love what you said about really telling the story, right? Communicate what is different about you. What is it about your solution that's going to help them drive revenue, drive profitability, whatever it is that they're supposed, that you believe that they care about. I think that there's a lot of people who don't do that well. So totally agree. Now, we talk about, you talk about parity a lot, meaning, I similar solutions out in the market that serve similar problems, say similar things, et cetera. So when we think about proliferation and consolidation in these spaces, we understand that apps are popping up left and right, and that's only been increasing over the past few years. Now, everyone has a spin on solutions for specific needs. They might be a little niche in certain areas. But what are some of, in your opinion, the most interesting or value add emerging technology categories of apps that are really popping up the most?
Yeah, there's a few kind of, I could go so many different ways. One of the ones that we're seeing, let's start with price testing, because it's one of the 4 P's of marketing that almost nobody is doing. And I advise for one of these price testing apps because I was just really blown away by what they do. But there's a few in the market, just like it's, an app that can take your data, see how you might have discounted or changed your price in the past, see conversion rate alongside that, and then make a prediction on what would happen if you increase your price by $5, lower it by $5, whatever it is. It gives you like a whole scale, because at the end of the day, if everyone forgot this, but most merchants didn't actually go to school and study economics. But if you remember it from high school, there's a supply and demand curve, and they meet in the middle, which means that like if you raise the price, there would be less buyers, but you might make more profit overall. Like the square underneath your kind of the point on the curve there is how you kind of judge these things. So merchants are just kind of putting up a price arbitrarily or based on like cost of goods sold plus 15% or 25% or something like that, and not really thinking about the value the product is being given to the customer, and then trying to figure out, well, do I want, and it's not even about branding or positioning, but it's like, do I want to sell 1,000 units like on the dot, right? I've just got a big shipment coming over from overseas. I only have 1,000 units for the month. If I sell out, I've kind of wasted the opportunity to kind of, let's say, raise my prices and make a little more profit on it. If I sell under the 1,000, then I'm sitting on this inventory and kind of waiting for the next cycle or month or something like that. So if I want to sell exactly this many units, in 1 month, what should my price point be? Boom, you can have the answers, and the algorithms are really good at figuring this sort of thing out. And so you can maximize for profit, you can maximize for new customers, or you could maximize for revenue. Those are the three things we're pretty much always trying to maximize for. And it's a complex problem that not a lot of tools out there can solve. So that's price testing. That's just one emerging category.
I love that. You just brought me back to my my college econ class for a second
Right?
there.
It's because it's one of those things that like everyone's forgetting that you can change your price. And that is it's marketing, it's business strategy, it's good, it's actually like I think people think that it's bad to change your prices, or well, if I lower my price, then people might come back and ask for a discount or a refund, a partial refund. So be it. Like, do it, see what happens, like deal with the loose change that happens afterwards, but like you find the right price and you could be making we had one test where they were making 17% profit per customer by changing the price after 1 month of testing.
Oh, wow. Oh my God. Well, so what are and just shifting gears slightly, what are some of the types of apps that you think in this next couple of years are going to start consolidating? So maybe like what's a space where there's a lot of saturation right now and you maybe see that going down?
So yeah, I mean, SMS is definitely very competitive, and the valuations of these companies is really absurd to me. I don't get how, like, everyone wants to raise money in this space and they're saying it's the Wild West, but to me, it's an established market with a relatively red ocean. There is some people still not using SMS and not using it to the fullest, but that doesn't mean that it's like, I don't know, free open market. It is free market, but it's very bloody in that space already. And the thing about the launched and like these venture backed SMS providers, and I like them all, we're partnered with many of them, and I think they're very great tools, but they're part of a larger solution, which is typically a mix of omni-channel marketing and personalization, and using certain types of AI-driven tools to understand segments and targeted messages, et cetera. So SMS can't be standalone, is what's really going to be happening over the next few years. It has to be integrated into the full-fledged, what Klaviyo is calling customer data platform. We don't call it an email service provider, I guess, anymore. It's been called a CRM in the past as well. So it's whatever you want to call it, though, the conglomerate of omni-channel tools. And that includes other things like web push notifications, even mobile app builders, I think, will be integrated into these a bit more. Pop-up tools really have to be part of this, and how you're collecting that information, which then leads to live chat. And then the question is, does customer service help desks come into play here? Because it is a communication channel, social media. And then it's like, oh my God, how can I do like 15 things really well? Well, there are companies that are raising hundreds of millions of dollars to be the best at everything, or acquire and conglomerate everything. And so they're competing on multiple fronts and doing a really good job, which is making it harder for the new guys to come up with a quick win. Or maybe if they're, as an example, I've seen an SMS tool that just does abandoned cart SMSs. Okay, great. Like, that's a cheapo $5 a month, $10 a month tool coming in at the underside of the market to stay simple, but everyone's going to outgrow it if their company's growing. So there are some things that kind of make sense. So you find little niches or holes to plug. But at the end of the day, the high growth brands are going to be going with these larger conglomerate tools that are the best at everything.
Right. And I feel like I'm trying to remember where I read it. I think it was a Gartner article that came out, a year or two ago, and they're really starting to recommend more that, just like you're saying, gone are the days where these monolithic platforms are doing everything for your business. And now you really need to be looking best of breed. Now, I think I resonate a lot with what you just said. Now, I think that you teed up the answer to this question, but so then how has the app and the tech landscape over this past, let's call it a decade, how has that impacted the ease of entry for new brands into e-commerce?
Oh yeah, it's been quite the game changer. And so it's interesting because, I would say that like, everything's built on a network of something else, right? We needed a network of people having the internet being on phones, the internet being highly accessible. Then after those things started happening, it was like, well, now we need the e-commerce platform to make it really easy to start the store. And then we need these email marketing tools to make it really easy to send messages and communicate. We need order management tools to be easy to use in shipping. And so like all of these things coming to a head at the same time absolutely has decreased the barrier to entry, where you could start a store today for like $40 if you wanted to. Now, it probably wouldn't be successful. It helps to put a little bit more time and budget into it, but some people are starting stores like that. And sadly, many people are kind of getting taken advantage of by get-rich-quick schemers and people kind of promising you the world. I saw a little GIF the other day, and it's pretty straightforward. It was like how to make money online, and it was like, and then on the other side, it was like, you work. Like it's hard work to do it, right? It's not like easy. It's just that the tools that are there, we have drag and drop builders now. We don't even need to code to get the website up. Seriously, you can buy an out of the box theme and basically go complete no code all the way into market and sell product. And Shopify or whatever platform you're using, taking advantage of their payment processor and all these things. So you can be off and running in no time. You don't even need products because there's drop shipping sites that you can test products on. I don't necessarily recommend that. I like seeing people with innovative product ideas coming to the platform and having innovative channel ideas. So all of these things increase the ease of entry. And there is also a lot of scalability to the technology products. So it's increasing the ease of actually getting off the ground and growing. But so now the barriers to entry is around experience, education, hard work. Those are the three things we're looking for. And then like product differentiation. What do you actually know about beauty products? I have a friend who started a magnetic eyelash company, and it's a guy. He knew nothing about magnetic eyelashes, but what he did know was that there was a problem with them and that the current products in the market sucked. So he went down that product development rabbit hole and actually learned a lot about the product category. And now I think they're doing like 7 million a year. They've grown like incredibly. So
hey, if you have that's like the basics of it, right? I mean, if you are solving a problem, then there's someone out there is going to want to buy it. And so I like that story a lot. Now, I understand that this is probably going to be very specific to every unique customer, client, or company that you speak with. But so if someone comes to you and they don't know what their problem is, what's the process that you go through with them to help them either identify the problem themselves, or so that you and your team come to the revelation of, okay, well, this is the category of tools we should look at, or maybe even more granular?
Yeah, it's always actually a very similar process for everybody, but it uncovers like wildly different results, as you might expect. So we need to know, and we're turning this into technology. So this is going to become an automated process. Right now, it's actually a phone call, not too dissimilar from this Zoom call that we go through to get this information. But first, we need to know, hey, how much money are you making? Like, what's your profit margins? What is who's inside the company? How many people? What are you selling the most of? And we might even go through the store and look at some of the product detail pages. Are there any upsells on these pages? Do you have a lot of products, a few products, subscription products? Things like that. Low average order value, high average order value. What's your retention coefficient, loyalty, referral coefficient, a few things like that. So we got to get at the business metrics. The core business metrics are fundamental to the tools. Some tools you can't use with low SKU counts. Some tools you can't use with low average order value. Some tools you can't use, if your product is really a single time purchase product versus a product that like is consumable and renewable. And so we get into the business in that way. We kind of look through it. And then of course, the next thing we need to know is, what are the tools you're currently using? So what's your review tool? What's your loyalty tool? What's your upsell tool? What's your personalization tool? Your CRM, your email, your SMS. We kind of look at those individually. And then typically right there on the spot, we're able to identify one pretty key, like big gap, I'd say somewhere between reviews, loyalty, or SMS. Like somebody's usually missing one of those. And I consider them all very crucial for any established and growing brand. Loyalty, of course, comes in a few different forms and can be added later, but typically it's good to have loyalty from the beginning because we want people to come back, even if we want the first customer to come back just as much as we want the 100th or 1,000th customer. And so that's where we see some of the gaps, and then often that leads to identifying additional opportunities that they might not have thought of, like buy now, pay later tools, shipping insurance, that post-purchase upsell component that a lot of brands can benefit from, but not every brand, or price testing as an example, where it's like, oh, you've got like one flagship product and you just chose $60 a month. Let's test that. Like, why don't you? So let's start there, right? And so that's how we kind of uncover the opportunities.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned, loyalty so often being one of the bottlenecks or one of the issues. I did an interview. I forget exactly who it was I was speaking with, but their focus is customer acquisition. But the biggest piece of advice they give people is focus on your lifetime value, focus on bringing your customers back, because you can be constantly bringing new people in, but if they don't have a great experience or they don't have a reason to come back, then you're just churning and burning names at that point. So love that. Everything you just said resonated. But if we think about the Shopify ecosystem specifically, right? I mean, my understanding is that because it's so open, it's really enabled a lot of technologists, developers, people to build their own solutions to problems that they identify or people out in the ecosystem do. So I guess talk me through a little bit about your thoughts on Shopify, when it comes to picking and choosing the right apps for someone's shop, right? How should e-commerce brands look at Shopify strategically?
The Shopify App Store is kind of a mess. if you haven't noticed, it's 6,200 apps, I think, something like that, growing at 60 apps a week, and about 59 of those apps are just not needed for your business, or they already solve a problem that's already been solved. Maybe it's, like you said, just one person solving their unique problem. And so you've got a ton of these $3, $5, $10, $20, maybe even up to $50 a month apps that are small. They have small kind of market share. They have like 100 customers, and there's not always anything wrong with them, but in general, those apps can lead to they might not be maintained as well. They might not hold your information in as high security. Shopify has rules and regulations around this, but it's two guys in a garage. They solve the problem for their clients. Maybe they're running an agency, and then they just put it on the app marketplace to see if it could work well and sell more. And that could actually end up breaking your site, slowing down your site. You can have old code left in there. They might not be loading asynchronously. They might not be using the latest security patches. So those tools are a little bit more at risk than others. It doesn't mean that every single one of them is. It's just that in general, across the, let's call it 4,500 apps that are kind of falling in that category out of the 6,200, they're a little bit more high risk. So most of the time, and what we focus on specifically, are the tools that really like change the game in the business. So not like a swatch tool or a bundling tool, which is sometimes actually quite important, but like a lot of those things are relatively solved, and some of them can even be done with just manual coding instead of buying a $5 a month tool. So it's like, do you want to pay an hour developer costs or $5 a month? And it's, you can tell, we know that after 12 months we're breaking even, and it's often just better to go ahead and throw the money into the custom built solution. Not always, but you got to kind of judge each one. So look at the larger established brands. Another kind of tip from earlier is, if you don't know what to do, go with the companies that are venture backed, and because they have a lot of pressure to build features and find product market fit and do a great job for their customers. And so they're going to be held to higher standards than a slow growth app. And that's there's reasons to go both either way, but like, I like to kind of use a few of those things as judging moments to really understand, is this technology going to be a partner with me for the long term? Is this a quick fix solution until I save up $1,000 to, build it out custom? Is this going to only work till the next iteration of my site, of my product, of my brand? Is this just a placeholder for an employee I don't have yet? Things like that.
Yeah, no, I think it's really hard to come up with rules of thumb, but I think those were super digestible. So I guess if we think about some of the changes that have been taking place for e-commerce players as well as retailers, there have been more tools available to them, like we've been talking about this entire conversation. But what are some of the biggest changes that these entities have had to go through since the pandemic, since the shutdowns were happening? I mean, I guess give me your take.
We've got iOS 14 and iOS 15 coming out, which is, if you guys haven't heard, iOS 15 will officially kill the email opens. So every email will be marked as open if it's coming on an iCloud or iOS device, which is really interesting. So you're going to have really good looking results soon, everybody, but they won't really matter. Your revenue numbers aren't going to change. You just don't have clarity on what's going on. And then, of course, iOS 14 and changes to Chrome and cookies and going cookieless, and Facebook has made large changes around that. So yeah, even despite the giant boom in e-commerce and a lot of people shifting mindset to buying online versus in store, you have these serious issues around data and privacy. And so the answer is, of course, we needed to, before the pandemic, be collecting lots of data points. That's why loyalty is important, because if you have a POS system at your retail location that's collecting phone numbers and helping people join a loyalty program, you could text message them today, telling them about an online sale, right? And a lot of people weren't doing that. And the shutdown was, their businesses were relying on foot traffic. And as you know, what people forget is that foot traffic is a traffic source. It is just like Google or Facebook or influencers. It is a traffic source. And that if you rely on one traffic source as a business, you're more liable to be open to,
putting all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, exactly. So having the multiple channels and bringing people from one channel to another is obviously very important in strengthening the relationship across whichever channel the customer wants to communicate with you on. So if it's Facebook, WhatsApp, Telegram, could be TikTok, it could be Snapchat, whatever. It always depends on the brand, but that's been writing on the walls for the last 10 years, I'd say, is looking at omni-channel communication. But really in the last 12 months, it's like the brands that did that well prior are going to be thriving, and the ones that didn't do it well are going to probably be hurting on the growth front and wishing they'd kind of listen better to the advice.
Yeah, there was an interesting graphic that I've seen that it puts together, the 2008 stock market crash, and then the past year and a half, 2 years, right? And during the 2008 crash, the companies that weren't investing in long-term growth, if you actually look at their trajectory, in 2009, 2010, the years following, they were actually significantly behind the companies that invested in technology, were forward thinking, and I really think that we're seeing the same thing manifest in the past year and a half, 2 years.
Correct. Yeah.
So the thing that I would really like to leave our listeners with from this great conversation today, I want you to make 3 predictions for us, and we're not going to hold you to them, but just kind of riff off for us a little bit. So looking for your biggest predictions for the future of e-commerce for 3 groups of people: app developers, e-com brands, and consumers. And I can repeat those, but let's start with app developers.
Yeah, for app developers, wow. This is an interesting one. I think you're going to be held to higher standards when it comes to pricing transparency. A lot of app developers, if your tool isn't providing revenue or value or performing on its key metric, your brand is no longer going to pay that monthly recurring fee. They're going to cut you right away. I have worked in SaaS with companies that are like, no, we don't email those accounts because they're dormant accounts. Dormant accounts means they pay us $1,000 a month, and they send they use whatever our core metric is. They use that exactly 0 times a month. So we're literally just milking them because it's a recurring subscription. I think that will be a thing of the past, as well as we have Black Friday, Cyber Monday coming up as an example, and you have peak orders, peak contact records, and all of those things that raises prices. But then the next month you have a lot less orders. So pricing transparency means lowering your prices for the merchant when they move down in tiers, which a lot of tech companies aren't doing. So that is absolutely first and foremost for app developers. And of course, we're building technology to monitor those tools and hold them more accountable. So
Okay.
a
I
little
love
biased,
that.
but
No, that okay. So I think that was a great prediction. So now e-commerce brands, and there may be a little overlap, I guess, between the two, but
I think e-commerce brands are going to, you're facing fiercer competition, more market equilibrium. So where do you keep competitive advantage? And obviously, maybe Nike has proven it's with brand, and figuring out what that relationship with the customer really means, and making sure that, for instance, that text message, which I'm in so many different, e-commerce brands, SMS lists, that text message that's like, sale, buy now, 15% off. Like, that's not really the way that people want to communicate with the brand. It might bump revenue up, but there might be that might be misleading, right? You go, oh my God, we made 40,000 off that SMS blast. Well, you could make, 60,000 a month by having a nice, steady retain and loyalty and retention strategy, as opposed to a sales oriented strategy. So like you said, thinking long term about retention and investing in your customers, which, again, we heard 5-star customer service from all technology companies. E-commerce brands need that 5-star customer service. They need real-time live chat, which we know that most brands still aren't doing, which is sad, and answering those customer questions, and transparency, which is absolutely true.
okay. And so you just took the words right out of my mouth. I was about to say, well, first we have transparency in pricing, transparency in the problem that they're solving for app developers, for e-commerce brands. Now for consumers, right? Buy online, pick up in store, buy now, pay later, all of these things that have become, household terms in the past 15 months. What are some of the other cool things that we can, look to the future for?
I've got a couple of big predictions here for you. And this one, I'll start with one that's a little smaller, but e-commerce brands are now clearly tying in causes they care about when selling to consumers. And that's because consumers are moving more into a shift of buying with their hearts, essentially. And there are a lot of choices out there. And so things that focus on sustainability, renewable resources, reducing carbon footprint, giving back to the community, there is a clear consumer shift to that. Now, the cooler prediction that I've been screaming from the rooftops for the last few months, and I'll say it again, is consumers it's not going to be just Amazon dominating the market very soon. I predict Shopify will enter with an Amazon competitor, where you will be able to buy these cool brands that you have relationships with through a central portal of what might be like shop.com or myshop.com. I don't know what domain Shopify will buy for this, but it'll be like the anti-Amazon. It'll be a big conglomerate movement. Shopify is still a publicly traded company, but we kind of know that there's been this necessary evil of Amazon, the 2-day shipping, if you've ever met an employee from Amazon, the burnout and relentless work strategy inside, and of course you've got the end laborers who are fighting in unions and all these things. So there's this sort of evil mentality. I'll stay agnostic for now on whether they're evil or not, but what we know for sure is that there is another way to do business, and Walmart and Target and other leading retailers in the space are doing different things, but Shopify really has this opportunity because they have millions of unique and individual brands selling unique products, not just drop shipping from China, but like actually putting their own spin on things, discovering new ways to make products. We're going to have a really great new consumer marketplace for engaging with brands and products and building relationships with them conglomerately, as opposed to, right now, if I want socks, I go to Bombas, and if I want shoes, I go to Tom's. It'll be a little bit more of a one kind of place for the niche products.
Yeah, it sounds like you were kind of describing a digital mall.
Yes. So
I love that.
That's exactly. So it will be, I think, a bit more like that, since the malls are dying, but we are looking for that shopping experience online. And Amazon is massive, and you can't hold that against them. They have so many products, great prices, fast shipping, customer service, like it works. But like I think brands that are selling on Amazon, there's been an exodus in a lot of different ways. They want to own relationships with the consumer, and they do get eaten a little bit by Amazon's fees and stuff like that. And so there's a reason to have a more transparent platform that's like a competitor to Amazon out there.
Okay, I love that. So we boil those down. So app developers, transparency for the ecom brands, loyalty, focusing long-term on customer relationships. And then for the consumers, we're going to have some cool new digital malls to stroll through. And it's going to be more of a focus on relationships with specific brands is really what I took away from that. So cool. Well, Derric, this has been a fantastic conversation. I think there's been a lot of substance here. Let our listeners know where they can get in touch with you if they want to, talk to you a little bit more about some of the new e-commerce apps that are coming out every single day.
Yeah. And we give consultations for free. We've done it over 270 times with merchants. You go to ecommercetech.io and click the button in the corner. We'll schedule a call and talk about your tech stack. I'll tear down your website and your business and see what tools we can uncover that are going to work for your store.
Awesome, Derric. Cool. Well, hey, again, I appreciate the time. It was really, really great. And hopefully we can have you on for a future interview. That's it for this episode of E-Commerce with Coffee, powered by Amber Engine. If you haven't gotten your fix yet, be sure to get more e-commerce brand secrets on our website at amberengine.com. And don't forget to subscribe for more episodes.